So any apologies, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We've got apologies from Adrian Leather and we've got Ben Madden, but Karen Thompson should be attending on his behalf.
Great. Welcome, Karen. Okay. Declaration of interest. I think we've got the list in front of us, but just checking around the board that nobody needs to declare anything related to the agenda items. Thank you. The minutes of the Board of Directors held on the 27th. Somebody want to move? It's a correct record.
We'll just make one more. So just on page 14.7, I'm referred to Sarah Reed. I think it's just picked up Hugh's surname, so can we amend that?
I noticed that.
That's a real
Yeah.
Reese everywhere else, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Good correction. Okay. Paul, did you get that?
Yes, we did. I think Stephen has got his hand up as well, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 20, I think it is, under the report from the Finance Committee. Just a few corrections, if I may. In the second sentence, it should read, the committee alerted the board on the uncertainty. And then a bit further down, referring to the care group triumvirate, the point was that the care group offered no assurance. And then at the end of that paragraph, referring to half two, I think it should read half two plan submission, not half two position. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those corrections, Steve. I'll just check with the company secretary. We captured them, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mike. We've caught those.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just quickly go through action sheets and matters arising from the minutes of the public meeting.
Thank you, Mike. There are a number of matters which the board have asked to come forward. You can see that those are programmed in for various dates, and you can also see we've added some additional progress notes as well for the board. A number of actions are scheduled for today's agenda as well, and those reports are included on the agenda. There's nothing specific to refer to the board at this point other than to note the progress that has been made. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we've got a long afternoon today in the public board. We've got some really serious issues on the agenda, and we'll move now to one of those very serious issues, item 158, update on the quality and safety in urology, and I'll pass the floor to our Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair's just mentioned, the really important report that the board is receiving this afternoon, and later this afternoon, the report will be published on our website and simultaneously also on NHS England's website. And this is the report concluding the review of the independent investigation into urology services here at Morecambe Bay Hospitals Trust. This report was commissioned by NHS England and Improvement following this trust's request for support after issues have been raised around urology services via a number of fora, including by ex-colleagues and patients who wanted to let us know about the quality of care that they'd received and also concerns about the service. And I have to give thanks to both those colleagues that raised those concerns and those patients and families who also did so, that led to the board asking for the review to be commissioned. So in response to those concerns, the report has been developed over a number of years. It's a 2-year piece of work that's been conducted and has gone through lots of our records, lots of interviews with colleagues past and present and patients. And we welcome the report from the investigating team from Niche, that is the company that was commissioned to do the report, and fully accept all the recommendations within the report, which I will say a little bit more about in a moment. First of all, I'd like to apologise to any patients or families or any element of our community that have been impacted by the issues that have been raised, either the quality of care or the experience of care in our urology services over that period. And the period of review, it's important to note, spans some 20 years, and that is the scope over which the investigating body Niche has looked at in terms of the issues that have been raised. I do want to say, before I go into any elements of the report, that whilst this is the final publication of the report, the Trust has obviously been working with NHS England, with regional colleagues, and also with Niche as the investigating body, to take any actions over that period that needed to have been taken around improvements required. So whilst there will be outstanding actions we need to take forward at the end of this report, it is clear that the services that we provide today in urology are safe, and that the actions that we've taken over that period have been taken in full sight of our Regional Improvement Board and this Trust Board. But there are still issues for us to consider and also further actions for us to take forward, and that's important to note. When reading the report, it is really clear that over that period of time, this trust in its various guises and also other arm's length bodies and regulators have recognised the issues in our urology service and sought to take action as those incidents have been raised. What's equally clear is that the actions that were taken were either not done in a timely enough manner or not done well enough to ensure that those incidents were addressed appropriately and any improvements that were taken to be sustained. And that's a theme in this report. It's a theme that we've seen previously in the organisation about, I call it stickability, the approach we take to responding to issues and actions, and yet we still see in further reports down the line that we haven't managed to stick those actions appropriately, and that will be a considered focus for this board as we take forward any recommendations that feature in this report. I do want to highlight also our thanks to NHS England and Improvement for their support in commissioning this work, and to colleagues at Niche for conducting the review in the way that they have over this 2-year period. And I also want to give thanks to the current clinical leadership and operational leadership in urology, who've worked really hard over the last 2 years to ensure that any recommendations made over that period have been delivered, and that the improvements in the services that we've seen in urology are being sustained. And that's a continued focus both at this board and at the Regional Oversight Board. It's important to recognise in the recommendations, there are 72 recommendations in this report. A lot of them sit with the Trust in some themed areas, which I'll highlight in a moment. But there are also recommendations for other partners in our system to consider, including our commissioning colleagues, NHS England and Improvement, the Care Quality Commission and the GMC. And it's for those bodies to receive this report and consider what improvements they may wish to make in the roles that they played in dealing with the issues that we faced as an organisation over that period of time. We will make sure that as the actions develop from this report, it will continue to get oversight both at our system improvement boards at region, but also through our quality committee and the Trust Board as we continue to deliver the recommendations to a conclusion, but also to ensure we have a process to give clarity of how we're going to demonstrate that they are being sustained through our audit functions, and that will also be reported to board. So what does the report actually point attention to? What are the themes that are coming? I'm not going to go through all 72 recommendations, and I know non-executive colleagues will have some questions around the report, which we will get into. But there are broadly 9 areas that the report features. One is, as an organisation, where we know there are issues or incidents in a particular service, do we have an early warning system that's good enough to identify those things early so we can take proactive action at an early stage and give the support that's needed for any teams that are struggling in terms of that functionality? Are we making sure that we've got good, high quality medical leadership at every level of our organisation that can address those issues appropriately and support those colleagues to take sustainable actions that lead to those improvements we look for? As a board, we focus on our care groups and our integrated performance report as a mechanism for assurance. And one of the recommendations is that we need to spend more time at a subspecialty focused area, and that we deep dive or take an approach to triangulation of information that allows us as a board to get a greater insight into some of our smaller specialties that sit within these care groups. That we need to ensure that where there are pathway approaches to care delivery that don't sit within one service, that require multidisciplinary input, that we've got a more robust mechanism to ensure that that's happening, and that we can demonstrate its effectiveness, and if there are any gaps, we know early and how we're going to take steps to address those. That we focus on capturing and recording accurate patient information and recognise that there are a number of areas in which information around patient care and our pathways are captured, and that when we do proactive reviews or reactive reviews around incidents, that we're using all elements of information that's captured around the patient pathway to inform actions that need to be taken. I mentioned triangulation before, but that's the board using all of the information at its fingertips to ensure that the actions we support, or the challenge we give, or the areas that we identify that need further work are triangulated through things like not only our performance reviews and reports or our quality and safety metrics, but things like incidents or complaints or any issues that we've got around behaviour that should feature as part of any review that the board conducts. It's clear in the report that we also need to strengthen the way that we deliver our investigations and our reports when incidents are raised. And board colleagues will be aware we have another item on the agenda this afternoon, which is the work we've been doing with the Good Governance Institute for the last 12 months, part of which is designed to put a structure and a way of working in the organisation that addresses that point. To ensure that we have effective mortality reviews, any lessons that need to be picked up and cascaded and shared across other areas of the service or other sites, and that we have that good quality multidisciplinary input into reviews of that nature. And finally, we need to make sure that any external involvement that the board seeks, and there is evidence that there is a lot of that in this report, that supports those actions that I've just highlighted. So bringing partners together to make sure that we all own what the improvement work needs to be, and there's good support for the board and for the trust to ensure that those improvements can be taken. So, Chair, that's a recognition of the report and what it's saying. A thank you to those colleagues, those patients, those families who tirelessly raised those issues and made sure that we took this step to seek this external review. A thank you to the colleagues that have participated in the review, and a heartfelt apology from me as the Chief Executive and this board for any patients or members of the community that have suffered any distress or harm as a result of the issues that have been highlighted here. Clearly articulating the themes of action now, Chair, that need to be taken forward in the report, and a recommendation to the board that as the executive function we will take those actions forward through our due process and report in subsequent board meetings as to progress, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that summary, Aaron. I'll open the floor to colleagues. Any questions or responses? You?
Thanks, Aaron. I mean, this is clearly a really important report for us to consider, and going back as it does over 20 years, and recognising that some things have changed over that time, which are for the better, I think. So I think that's important. But I think one of the key issues about the way the report has been presented to us is that it makes recommendations and then clearly makes the statement that these are not just for the urology department, but they're for across the trust. And I think that's a key thing that we need to really grasp as an organisation, to look at how we can get below the care group level and to really understand what's going on in the subspecialties, which isn't always as easy as it sounds, but I think it's a challenge that we have to take on. And I think that the report is really helpful in the way it gives some suggestions about how we can do that, and pulling together all of the information, which is like the hard information about the things that we report nationally, but also the soft information about that comes in from complaints and concerns, even the things that maybe come into the Secretary's department, from patients and from GPs and such like. So I think there are some tremendous lessons here for us to apply across the whole organisation. And I really, on reading it, got the feeling that if we really get to grips with what's in the report, the organisation will be in a much stronger place, and really be in a place that we really can be assured that we're giving the best care that we possibly can for the local population, because that's what we're here for. And I think it just needs to be considered and given the seriousness that it requires. I'm sure we will do.
Thank you. I'm going to go Sarah, and then I'm going to go Stephen Ward. Sarah.
Thank you. I mean, to echo Hugh's comments, I mean, it's a really important report, and the fact that it's long-standard and deep-seated, there's a lot to work through and be addressed. And I think my question for the executives is, you know, we had the interim report last year, we recognise this is long-standing. What's in place now? What are the processes and protocols in place now and planned which would prevent this from happening again? And how can we be sure that those are being embedded?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So there's a number of things that feel very different in comparison to this time last year. The first thing I would mention is that our commitment to investigate incidents when they happen has become much more robust. I think that's both internally with a cohort of about 100 staff that have been trained. And as recently as last week, we secured an agreement with the healthcare investigation branch for them to support a further cohort of 40 staff to be trained up. And that's a very robust training program. So we have that expanding skill set in the organisation to be able to investigate things properly. The other thing I would call out is we're now committed to reviewing our escalation arrangements. So how people find their voice to call stuff out when it needs to be said, how we listen as an organisation to those concerns when they are articulated to us, and how we feed back to them what our reaction to that is and how we're going to support them. And that then leads into also reviewing the freedom to speak up guardian arrangements to make sure that those dovetail and they're accessed by the organisation and all of its staff. I would say those are the key things that we have in play at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Stephen Ward.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to perhaps develop a bit more the topic that Richard was talking to, that is the need to strengthen the quality of our investigations and to build on the competence there. I'm encouraged to hear what he says about these additional training, but I guess my question is, how will we get assurance that that skill set has indeed now been improved, and how will we see that these investigations are improved from the perspective of being complete, accurate, and having been performed with a high standard of integrity? And what board mechanism really will we have to ensure that that improvement has taken place? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen. So in addition to what I've already described, I would say that the Good Governance Institute has given us a great many number of improvement areas around our structures for committees and what we're discussing there. We have the 3A's report that provides us with an opportunity to articulate things to parts of the organisation. I feel that those that there's also inbound around about the end of Q4 next year, Q1, is the Patient Safety Incident Response Framework, which is a national initiative which will help deliver a lot of the standardisation around the reporting of incidents. So we're looking forward to being a full participant in that model that will get slowly rolled out towards April of next year. And I think that provides us with a really good framework. There's also inside the organisation, and myself and the chief nurse were doing it this morning, a real appetite to scrutinise incidents as they're coming to our attention, to understand what those are about, to ask searching questions at an earlier opportunity so that we're putting in place the right level of investigation. On the investigation side, I didn't make it clear enough earlier. The HSIB training system is a graded system where you can get, I think it's in 6 levels, and level 6 would be a master's level education in incident investigation. We're not going in at that level, but we might pull some people through to become super investigators, if you like. That training takes place, it's going to start early in the new year.
Again, if I may, Chair, that's all sounds great, but I think we can't assume that just because training is being delivered, then the impact has been achieved. I think there's a further step for us to show that that's been effective in the quality of the products. Thank you.
Yeah. Aaron, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, it's a principle, Stephen, that I think will feature as we approach particularly things like the recovery support programme. But the principle of using our audit infrastructure to regularly check in and test the effectiveness of the new processes and the systems that we put in place. And the recommendation I would make is that through the audit committee, we ask our audit function to put in place a series of audit work for these high impact thematic areas. So as well as delivering the objectives, we have a periodic step through the audit committee and audit processes to test the effectiveness. And I know that will feature also as an offer from Niche as the investigating body here to come back in 12 months on these recommendations to give us a review on how embedded and how effective our actions have been. So we'll ensure that the assurance process is stitched in with some audit infrastructure as well, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I've got Jeff Jolliffe and then Elizabeth Sedgley. So, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Although I'm not primarily here in my role as Chair of the CCG, I think you'd expect me to say a few words from that perspective. We welcome the arrival of this report. Things have gone on for a very long time, and I think people want answers. So I think it's a good moment to actually get to the point where we receive the report, and we look forward to reading this report and assessing the report, and then working with you in the coming months. I think there's probably two elements to that working with you. One is as a good partner in Bay Health and Care Partners, trying to support you to bring about those improvements, whatever that may mean. And I welcome the recent invitation to some of our clinicians on the executive to come in and work with you across quality matters. I think that's a really good sign of your intent to work in a different way, and it's very welcome, and I think it should be of some reassurance that the commissioners can work with the providers in this way. I think that's really good. But of course we do have to hold you to account to a degree as the commissioner, and I think the key thing that we need to do is, we have a high confidence that you will tackle these issues very seriously and these recommendations, try and implement them, albeit with the caveats that, for instance, that Stephen's just mentioned around how good can our investigations be. But I think the key thing that we're really keen to see is that things are embedded and don't slip back. And I think that's the thing that has to be different this time to sustain improvement in the long term. And we will try to work with you to do that, and also try to embed those processes into the organisations that succeed us, because we only have 5 months to go, don't we? So it's a good report, and we welcome its arrival, and we look forward to its implementation to improve patient care. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. With your chair of the CCG hat on, we welcome your comments and the support that you've shown. Equally, we absolutely 100% endorse the point you've made. We take the report very seriously, and embedding it so that we can improve our quality of care and patient safety, plus the pace of change. They're the important things. So we're grateful for the support that you offer. I'm sure outside the meeting, relevant colleagues will be in touch with you. So thank you for that. I'm going to bring in Elizabeth Sedgley, one of our NEDs, and then Bruce Jazzy, another one of our non-exec directors.
That's right. I've got two questions, if that's okay. So the first about is how do we, using the information that we've had from Niche, how are we going to roll out across the organisation to look and assess other services that we provide, particularly the subspecialties, the ones that aren't quite so visible, to ensure that they are, if they do need some support, that it goes in a lot quicker, and everyone, rather than get to the situation with stroke, where we've got a regulator telling us about this, that we are there, aware of it, and providing the support to make sure that they get back on track to provide a quality service.
Jackie?
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz. I think that's a really good question, and I think I'd like to point at quite a few things that have happened over the last year, if I may. So, as you know, in October 2020, GGI were commissioned to come and work to us and to look at all our risk management system, our ways of escalating issues from board to board, about reviewing our BAF, and there'll be a lot more about that later when I do my presentation about the outcome of the GGI work. But there's been a significant sea change, I would say, since I've been here in April in my role as NHSEI Director of Nursing in supporting the Trust, and then has taken on the interim role in September. So I can see some real changes in there, and changes in performance and around improvement as well. I think there's NHSE and I developed a system improvement board that is here to support us, and we've been having meetings in that respect for a number of months. And the level of work we're doing in there and the information we're sharing and the assurance we're sharing is making that work move along very well. So I think that's another way that we understand that we are making those improvements and seeing the assurance we need. What also has been developed is what is called the Enhanced Support Programme, and you'll know that within this Enhanced Support Programme, the urology and TNO, trauma and orthopedics, that's going to be discussed later, we're already part of those programmes. So they've developed in there the Safe Today model, so that we can see live interactive data of performance in there and issues in there. So that work is still ongoing. And just for fullness, Women's and Children's are also part of that programme. And I think Richard, as our Director of Governance, alluded to before, but one of the big things that myself and Damien Riley, who was the Improvement Medical Director, have set up was the Executive Review Group that takes place every Wednesday morning. So it took place this morning at 8 AM, where we actually triangulate all the data we've got coming in. So we looked at all the moderate incidents that have come in, we look at all the complaints that have come in, we look at the claims, and we can triangulate that. And what we've seen through using the 3A's reports and also about the work that we're doing, that we can see that we can actually provide assurance that we're actually triangulating issues that are coming through. What we need to get next, I think, is Kate's going to come and join us as our Chief Operating Officer around performance, and I think we need to link in our HR, so we're picking up behaviours and issues around that as well. So those will be coming in, but what we can see is that we are actually triangulating our data already, and we will bring those colleagues in as well to make sure that we're getting the right outcomes that we need.
Mike, if I can ask the second question, and this goes more to the reputational damage that obviously all this brings about, and the focus and the effect that that's having on not only existing staff but also potential staff that may be looking to join, join the trust in the next, say, 12 months or so. How do we manage that so that they don't feel that choose to go elsewhere rather than come here because of what they read? And
David, can that question be directed to you as head of OD, please?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, David. It's a really good question, but I think it's one that we can't look at in isolation. Medicine's quite a small world, and the fact that urologists had a dysfunctional team is I think is well known, and this makes it very difficult to recruit into that subspecialty anyway. And we have had ongoing difficulties in recruiting colleagues to that area. I think in many respects, actually, what the report does, it gives us the opportunity to really reset, to really refocus on quality and safety. And I'd like to think that by doing that, we will actually improve our ability to actually recruit. The OD work that took place, the team development activity, has managed to support a change in team dynamics and team atmosphere. It's not where we would ideally like it, but it's a big improvement on what it was. And what we've got to ensure is that continues to get embedded and improved over time when we start to bring those teams together, focused on the right thing, which is patient first, patient safety, patient quality. And I think once we can do that, the recruitment issues will fall away.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Liz. Bruce, you put your hand up.
I think most of my points have been covered, particularly by David, in terms of our primary focus should be patient safety and quality services. But I think we obviously need to accept the report and welcome and introduce the changes needed. But we also need to change through issues that we've identified through the Good Governance Institute in terms of how we escalate issues, how we change our agendas on the board so we can focus on things that are escalating, that are important in terms of patient safety and quality services. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Bruce. Good points. Thank you. Adrian has contacted me. He has a question. I'm going to direct it towards yourself, Jane. As the NED responsible for MHPs, he's pointed out that the niche report references on several occasions that there's a missed opportunity sometimes in maintaining effective professional relationships without the process being triggered by a failing in practice. So his question is two-part really. How effective has the MHPS process been in addressing professional relationship breakdown that impact on medical practice in our teams? And given the insight offered by urology, are there learning opportunities to strengthen the MHPS process to consider professional relationship breakdown prior to failure in practice performance?
So I think we've always got learning opportunities around how we sort of the process and the application of MHPS. We need to be in a position where we actively listen to everyone's concerns, and for that we need to all be visible and develop those relationships so they're confident to bring concerns forwards. But that's not just my role, that's everybody's role, to have that kind of relationship so people can come forwards. And we then need to respond to those concerns appropriately. But I think in terms of MHPS, it's often seen as a formal process at a point, but actually it's important that we address relationship problems, disruptive behaviours, teamwork issues at that really early stage so that we try and do everything we can to stop needing a formal process. We've got things like a behavioural framework in the trust, and it's important for us to all be promoting that, being role models for it, and then challenging when we need to. And we alluded this morning, we need to ensure that people have got the skills to do that, because those difficult conversations can be had constructively. And then we need to make sure that we've got support for the individuals to make any necessary changes. So things have changed. So obviously I've arrived in the last 4 weeks, and the responsible officer role has now included in as my portfolio, rather than being a separate role. We've made changes in how we manage those things. We've introduced a patient safety group, which is seen as more good practice, with agreed terms of reference. And actually we've used support from another trust where that's already embedded, where they've joined a meeting, giving us feedback and advice on how to strengthen that. And we'll use that going forward, I'm sure. Things in terms of formal investigations, it's really important that we've got teams of people who are trained in case investigation and case management. We've done a lot of case investigation in this trust, case investigation training in this trust in-house via our NHS resolution colleagues, but case management training went on hold through the pandemic, but we'd actually just asked them if they'll put some on for us in March or April. We're actually going to run that, all being well, alongside colleagues from other trusts, so that we develop a network of people, and actually we can use people from outside of the trust if it's felt more appropriate to do so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And then a quick question from me as chair while you're still there, James, so I can answer this question. The continuity of care is an issue that's raised in the urology report. So what's the current position for the services regarding continuity of care?
So continuity of care, I think probably those of us who are trained in the old system think continuity of care is not the same now as it was, and that's by necessity of changes from being more on call and working in teams to rota systems and working shifts. I think it's about, in order to make that work, so you do still have continuity care, and we do see that in specialties, is about effective teamwork. And that's the same whatever your shift pattern things are, and that's where we need to get to make sure that just the same as if you go on holiday, your patients are still cared for. So it's just the same if you're not there at the weekend. Your responsibility is to ensure that you have got a good plan in place and that people know what's happening around that. So that's around team working rather than the hours that people work or the shifts they work.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to look around the room first just to see if there's any further questions on this issue. Sarah?
Can we just expand? That's a really good point, Jane, I think that you've made around the importance of teamwork and highly functioning teams actually, and not dysfunctional teams. And I just wondered if we can hear a bit more about how we are supporting the teams in urology and other areas with improving teamwork and better relationships. I suspect it's not a question for you, Jane, probably a question for someone else.
David, can I direct that to you, as you've got your hand up as well, so that's coincidental, I hope.
Well, I was going to add something to what Jane had said. earlier on in response to the maintaining high professional standards questions. If I can respond to that, then I'll answer Sarah's question. But it's just to say that the maintaining high professional standards is that nationally based but locally interpreted process for dealing with serious concerns about conduct and capability. And by the time you enter into those processes, you've really missed the trick. All of the evidence is about early intervention, and the work from, say, Civility Saves Lives and Vanderbilt in the US. It's about early effective interventions, and that's what the approach that we've developed over the last couple of years has been trying to sort of re-emphasize and enforce across the organisation, remind people of their professional standards under things like good medical practice, and also our own behavioural standards framework. But if we can't resolve it, then it will escalate into maintaining high professional standards, and the board will have seen through the employee relations report how we're dealing with cases and fast tracking with cases using the learning we've already had previously. In terms of Sarah's question, it links back to the stuff that Jackie was talking about earlier about the enhanced support programs. We're using the enhanced support program to identify those hotspot areas, and we're tailoring a range of OD, and I'm sorry, I don't want to use jargon because in a public board, but sort of organisational development, team support activities to try and understand what the issues are and address them. So all of those areas that we've identified as a hotspot, we target our OD resource to supporting in terms of a bespoke programme. And I suppose the final point, just to note, is that we currently seeking feedback from every single one of our colleagues and volunteers on 4 key topics for the organisation through this sort of the moving forward platform, which we've spoken about the last 2 board meetings. And we're asking all of our colleagues at the moment to feedback on our vision, our values, our culture and our leadership. And what our colleagues are saying may be uncomfortable reading, but we need to reflect on it, we need to listen to it, we need to consider it empathetically, and then we need to take intelligent action as a consequence. And that's embedded right at the heart of our recovery support programme.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up then, and I think building on Stephen's point from before, having undertaken those interventions, how are we going back to those teams and understanding if they've made a difference to behaviours and if therefore outcomes are starting to shift?
Well, each and every one of those programmes, using the learning from urology, we start into them with a baseline. So we take a baseline and then we can measure improvement over time, and we can re-measure it to see if it sustains. But that was the original learning from urology, and we're applying that learning now to each of those hotspot areas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Jill Stannard.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very comprehensive report, and it bears reading at least twice, I think, because it actually gets under the very complexity of some of the issues. So there's lots of lessons in this for us, for other organisations, broadly lessons, but I just focusing on us as a board is that can we give assurance that all of us, each one of us, will reflect on our own role within this and think about what we could have done better? Because certainly I know in reading it myself, there's a lot in there for me. When Nish first gave the key things that we could have done better, I know we made changes at Quality Committee then. We were very keen to have that and get on and make those changes. And an example was making sure that every single external review should come to Quality Committee and not elsewhere. And we've been following that up. But I just think this isn't just for then, it's for now and for the future. And I think it's something that perhaps we all ought to do is reflect on our own learning, think about what we could have done better, each of us, and actually make a log to change that in future, make a note to ourselves about what we're going to do differently. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. I don't know whether you can see colleagues, but virtually everybody's shaking their heads and agreeing with you there. It's a really good point. And we will all reflect, I'm pretty certain about that. And colleagues, this is a very, very serious report. It's unusual, and I think the Trust should be grateful that we've had a review of an area that's had difficult issues over many years, that the review has spanned a 20-year time frame. Over 26,000 documents were looked at, over 500 patients were looked at, dozens of staff were interviewed, as well as members of the public and those interested. And we've now got that report from NHSEI with the 72 recommendations, as the Chief Exec has mentioned in his report, and we will implement those recommendations, and we will find a way of ensuring that we measure that they're embedded and at pace as well. The recommendations to the board on the report are to accept the investigations report, and I think that's absolutely unanimous, to formally apologise for the harm caused to our patients and their families. I'm looking round and people are nodding. And then to accept the recommendations and note receipt of the action plan based on the recommendations, which will come to the Board of Directors meeting in due course, and once it has been scrutinised by the Quality Committee. People are happy to accept those? Thank you. Aaron, thank you. The report is 225 pages long. I agree with you, Jill. It takes several readings. So thank you for the summary, Chief Executive. That was really useful. We're going to move on. We will come back to this. We will move on now to matters for consideration. Item 159, the patient story, the perioperative wellness programme update. Some of you will remember that following the Board of Directors meeting in April, it was agreed to present the outcome of the programme at the Board of Directors at a future meeting, which is today. It's part of this drive to seek assurance that when ideas or new initiatives are put into place, that we're seeking evidence that it's been embedded. So Fliss Swift will introduce the story and then play a short audio clip to support it. Wendy Craig is here. Hello, Wendy, to provide a summary update. But the Director of Corporate Affairs will present it. Okay. Phil, I think you're on mute there. No, still can't hear you, Phil.
Perhaps I'm Fliss Swift, I'm the Patient Experience Lead, so perhaps if Phil has some technical difficulties, I might be able to step in and introduce this story.
Thanks, Lee.
Is that okay? Are you okay now? So I'm delighted to introduce this story. We bring a patient story to each board meeting, and this one has a particular wow factor. It's about a gentleman, Jeff. I hope that you've had the opportunity to read the story in your board papers and to see also the photographs, the before and after photographs of this gentleman. I say that because he was a particularly large gentleman and he's lost over half his body weight, which is a phenomenal success in itself. Unfortunately for Jeff, when he had lost all this significant weight, his health, he wasn't without health issues. He had a significant gallbladder issues, and he needed to be admitted to hospital. He was in a lot of pain and discomfort. He was admitted to hospital on 3 occasions. He was getting quite despondent, which is understandable if you've lost all that weight and you've worked so hard and you're still feeling ropey and rough. So his weight did start to creep back on. Whilst in hospital, the consultant was actually Wendy Craig on this occasion, and she spoke to Jeff about the benefits of being as set for surgery as you can possibly be. And Jeff took her advice on board and he got his diet books back out. He started to record what he was eating and he resumed his weight loss journey and lost some of the weight that had crept back on. This was really him heeding the advice, returning to good habits, and actually he got his surgery. It was successful keyhole surgery, which meant that his discharge from hospital was very quick. His recovery was really, really fast, and he's a huge advocate of actually being as set for surgery as you can possibly be. So you've got Jeff's full story. I'm going to play you a clip now, which is Jeff detailing, sort of summarising his story. And also, one other thing I would like to mention is I'm very excited to say that Jeff has agreed to be one of our volunteers for the Set for Surgery programme. So he will be supporting other patients who are actually embracing some health changes whilst they're waiting for their surgery. So without further ado, let me play this clip. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go.
Nothing coming here, Fliss. There's nothing on the shared screen here yet.
Oh, right. Did we have a problem there?
Yeah, it's not come through on the screen. Paul, Company Secretary's office, can we get some support, please?
We'll see what we can do, Mike. Fliss, have you been able to highlight your screen?
Yeah.
So that it broadcasts.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
No.
It says it's sharing. That's strange. Share content.
While you do that, Fliss, with Paul, is it all right if we bring Wendy in then to give a summary update on progress? If you're there, Wendy, please don't worry about the, hi Wendy, please don't worry about the technical aspects. We'll take our time, and when the video comes on, please play it. And if any of you get disconnected, we're very patient. We'll either ask another speaker or move on while you reconnect. So at the moment, I think we've got your computer screen in front of us.
I'm going to take it off.
Okay. So, Wendy?
Okay. Is that all right? It's fine. So, Fliss has obviously got the benefit of the really rich patient stories, and having her expertise and the wider team feed into her programme has been absolutely invaluable. I think we were asked to come back as a group to feedback the outcome of the chartered trial, which the group undertook in terms of perioperative wellness over last winter, when we weren't allowed to operate, when we couldn't do anything anyway because of the lockdowns and the restrictions on sites. So to recap, our idea to roll out this wellness programme, any patient with unaccounted risk that they felt they might be able to improve upon, because we had that longer waiting time, why not capitalise on that? Do something against the deconditioning that so many people experienced from lockdowns and see if we can turn things around. So we offered that out to 200 of our patients most at risk on the waiting list over last January, February time. High level summary is patients who already had glimmers of hope of an admission date weren't interested, and who can blame them because they already waited a long time. Of the 2/3 who engaged, who listened to the call and who were contactable with reason to be, roughly 50-50 split between wanting to just get on with their surgery, albeit some of them actually said, but actually this is a good idea. You know what, I think I can do this myself. I don't need that coaching. But nearly a third, so nearly 60 of our patients said, great idea, yep, sign me up. So the 58 patients that progressed right through, the 3-month follow-up data shows that 80% of them had objectively measured health gains, be that significant weight loss, increased exercise habits that were becoming regular for them, stopping smoking, cutting back alcohol, any one of those things improved. That was win-win. So much so that in 4 of those patients, they became so well that they didn't want to have surgery anymore. They just felt great. And, you know, to put context on this, this is not urgent, it's not cancer surgery, but it's for that great volume of long waiting, joint replacement, gallbladder, hernia surgery, that kind of thing, which we know fine that with lifestyle modifications, we can sometimes get rid of the need for surgery. And I put another nice patient quote into the summary paper, which I've sent around. In terms of what next for the programme, we're growing, we're sharing. We've had a national visit from the elective recovery lead, who thought our programme was exemplar. Rahul Keith, my co-lead on the GP side, and I have done basically a mini roadshow since autumn time, taking it through the National Health Inequalities Network, and our neighbouring ICP at Preston Chorley want to adopt. Building resilience, how we make this business as usual. Fliss already mentioned the volunteer programme. We've successfully appointed a volunteer coordinator in order to buddy up those patients most at risk with preferably previous patients like Jeff, who say that they can help others. And we know from our preceding focus group that patients are more likely to listen to somebody like them than they are a doctor. We've also appointed our patient health optimisation officer so that we know when we're rushing through clinics, we don't necessarily take all the time that we should do to have those conversations. So instead, she's going to sit screening the waiting list as it grows, making that offer out to all the patients as they join it, if they have those risk factors, and offering some individualised health coaching, whilst also reinforcing the importance of those behaviours and conversations with our clinical staff. In terms of successful funding and spread, in terms of the elective recovery TIF funding at the ICS level, we've got a £1 million digital bid confirmed as successful to spread the I3 aspects. So we've now got the intel as purchased by our trust to own the oversight, all the risks based on primary care data for patients listed within the ICS for surgery. So not only can we help them with health gains by further distributing the good of the charter and that wellness approach, we can also get insights into where those pockets of inequities lie, target help where it's needed most, and actually understand our problem at system level. In addition, Cumbria County Council have partnered with us more effectively recently, and we've got a joint bid going in there, again to help the patients most at risk, to try to get more resources backed up for weight loss, exercise programmes, smoking cessation, etc. We basically have to make the whole across the ICS. That's the next challenge. We need to have reinforcement conversations at primary care, because the earlier that we land this message, the better. We've got a lot of help now from Trust Comms, from patient experience, from building on those 2 new appointments. We believe that we can make this business as usual for all our patients. And we really just now need to embed a sort of learning system based on our outcomes dashboard to keep on proving that proof of concept, which I think has adequately been shown, with 80% benefit recorded in the patients who engage and some very positive feedback back from them at the end. All the better when they agree to become the graduates of the programme and buddy up future patients. So I'm hoping Fliss can now share Jeff's audio. If not,
I'll try one more time. It did work for us before, didn't it, Wendy? So most infuriating, but I'll try one more time. So if I share my screen, bear with me. And then I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go into here. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to make sure that when I share, I slide something across. Include computer sound, yes, please. Right, let's try now. One more click, hopefully. Right, please let me know if you can hear this.
Hi, my name is Jeff, and I am an advocate of set procedure. A long time ago, I was a very, very large gentleman, weighed up to nearly 40 stone. I decided to lose weight because the doctor told me that if I didn't lose weight, I was going to die, basically. So I went on a diet. I trimmed right down to 19 stone, but then I started to experience problems with my gallbladder. I had 3 bouts in hospital. When Wendy Craig came to see me and told me about fit for surgery, she advised me to lose a little bit more weight. If I could have lost a bit more weight, the chances of my surgery being done keyhole were greater than the chances of it being done open surgery. So obviously keyhole is a lot better for me. I managed to lose a little bit more weight, had the keyhole surgery done by Wendy Craig. My recovery was much quicker. I was out of hospital the next day and I was proper poorly with my gallbladder. They did a great job. I'd just like to say if you can lose weight for surgery, it's the best thing that you can possibly do for your recovery and for yourself and for you getting better in the long run. I hope this helps. Thanks, Jeff.
There you go. Did everyone hear the story?
They did.
Yeah, fabulous.
I'm going to open it up, Wendy and Fliss. I'm going to open that up now to colleagues. I'll start with Phil, but just before that, I'll ask the first question. Wendy, you were asked to come back to the board with Fliss to present today based on several months' work, really. Do you feel now that it is embedded in the trust?
I think with the recent appointments, it will be easy to embed it. They only started in post less than a month ago, but that has given us that resilience cushion whereby, like I mentioned, everybody's busy, everybody's trying to do more in less time these days with the recovery efforts. But in order to make sure we do the right thing for every single patient, we need some bolsters there. And I think just with that gradual build of movement, and as more patients actually come back to us telling us positive stories, it's becoming harder for colleagues not to see the benefits. So yes, it's too early to say yes, it's completely embedded, but it's well progressed on its journey.
I'm going to ask Jackie Bird to come in, Phil. I know you want to come in. I think Jackie's going to respond to what you've said, Wendy.
Yeah. Wendy, I think it's absolutely great what you've described here, and I just wondered, has it got any relevance to prehabilitation in medical specialties as well? Because what you're describing here is about how you get fit, and you've seen some real advantages of people deciding that they didn't need surgery. And I'm just thinking for some other long-term conditions, could this approach be rolled out?
Absolutely, because we were having another conversation with our community colleagues yesterday. We recognised the overlap on, well, it's actually Bay Medical ICC in terms of their winter wellness and their long-term conditions. We think there's a great deal of overlap within the patients that are in their primary care-based schemes for those and the patients that come up in our programme. But we also know in terms of the prehab model that that episode of illness, needing surgery, any contact with the health system, that's an important life event for any patient. And we know that that can then be used to tap into some decision making and life changes. That's why prehab works. And traditionally, it was always a short-term thing for cancer. But we kind of used this pause with COVID to say, actually, you've got a bit of time now, guys. You've got a bit of time to train. You wouldn't go out and run a race without this. So absolutely, yes, if somebody's diagnosed with something that's potentially a long-term condition, be it, I don't know, type 2 diabetes, rheumatology conditions, any of those, I don't see why we couldn't apply the same principles. It'll take some more resources, but absolutely, it's the right thing to do. And tapping into that mindset change is definitely the right thing to do.
Thanks, Wendy. I think Jane as well, our Associate Medical Director, wants to come in. Phil, just keep your patience a little bit longer.
Wendy, sorry, mine was just actually building on what Jackie was saying, but it was going back to the prehabilitation for cancer, and are we planning to extend this? Because obviously this is perhaps a longer programme than cancer patients have got, but we know that prehab for cancer surgery leads to better short-term and probably long-term outcomes as well. And how do we manage to sort of bring those people in, especially when we have pathways that often go to tertiary centres, and there are sometimes some inherent delays in those, aren't there?
Well, we already do this through all the cancer that gets treated within our own department. The colorectal cancer patients have their own prehab pathway that's a much shorter version of this, but it was designed and implemented before this came to being. We also, since we got our CPET facility at Lancaster for use across Bay, that gave us a sort of extra, still not early, it's a month maximum before your colorectal resection. We also use it for abdominal wall reconstruction. So yeah, it's part of a bigger picture. Good point about the tertiary referrals. That would need a bit more joined upness, but actually as we're looking to roll out across ICS, there's an opportunity there to use actually the i3 that we've now got underpinning this, the digital platforms. We could potentially look at doing something bigger there, but.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Phil, over to you. Still not hearing you.
Mike, any better? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can see some nods. The dogs now know I've not got the headset on, so they might start barking now, Chair. Jane and Jackie have said a lot of what I wanted to say really about the crossover, certainly to medicine. And I don't know if people are cited, we run some exercise classes in other areas. And this isn't just about exercise though for the Get Set for Surgery. So in rheumatology, there are exercise classes that local businesses help to support in Lancaster, such as Atkinson's Coffee, give up their premises. I only say that, Chair, because I'm a patient who attends it. The Get Set for Surgery, just some things I want to say. It reduces length of stay and it reduces readmissions. So that the money's great, but on the other side, it's just better for the patient, Chair. The evidence is no longer up for debate. You know, it has been over the years. We know better fitness levels, reduce complications when having an operation. The body's better able to cope with the stresses as a result of the surgery. And that was one of the issues for Jeff in terms of whether he could have the surgery the first time or not and the chance of infection. So his outcome's much better as a result of, and it only takes 4 weeks of regular exercise to start to turn that around, just like it's only 12 hours from smoking cessation to start to see improvement in your lungs. There's no ask today, Chair, in terms of pounds, shillings and pence. It was literally an update, just asking for people to continue to invest their time in it and their support. And the development will continue to liaise through BHCP, the Bay Health and Care Partnership, and the integrated care system as we progress it, Chair.
Thank you. We know. Sorry, who are you going to say no? We know. Who am I looking at now? Jeff. Sorry, Jeff. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't want to prolong the agony. It's a great presentation, and Wendy's, I think, heard me say this before. But it's a great offer, and it should be industrialised across the Western Hemisphere. Never mind UHMBT. So, you know, so let's hope that happens. I'm a big fan of patients changing their mind, and I think. And as you know, I think we sometimes refer to many patients as GPs, and then inevitably surgeons operate on them. Sorry, Wendy, but they do, don't they? Because that's the nature of the beast that we are. And I think actually having an active program like this also gives chance for patients to reflect on: do I really need this operation? Do I really need this knee operation? If I lose a bit of weight and I get a bit more active and a bit stronger, etc., etc. So I welcome it. It's a great project. Well done.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back to Phil's point now, Jeff, that you've given us an update, Phil. We thank you for that. That's what the board asked for. It will continue to roll out, and we look to exec colleagues really to provide us with regular updates. Wendy and yourself, Liz, thank you as always. Thank you for giving us the update from the work from last April. And I'm sure the board will continue to scrutinise what you're doing over the next year to ensure that it's even further embedded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well done, folks. Colleagues, we'll move on then to item 160, my chair's report. It's in front of you. It's the same. I won't go through it. It's an update on my activities. I'm happy to answer any questions. It gives you an update of the activities in the last month and some of the issues such as the improvement and transformation and recovery are in the board papers. COVID-19 is also within the board papers. So happy to answer any questions. No, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 161, which is the Chief Executive's report. I'll pass the floor over to the Chief Exec.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be equally brief. Now feels like an opportune moment to welcome two new colleagues to the board. So welcome to Jane McNicholas as our Interim Medical Director and to Richard Sachs as our Director of Governance. A long time trailing, I think you're joining us, so it's great that you're here with us at your first board meeting. You're very welcome. We're also following Kate's announcement of her retirement at the end of the year. We're out to advert now for hesitate to say replacement chief operating officer. I'm not sure you can replace Kate, but a chief operating officer, and we'll look to make that appointment pre-Christmas, Chair. And then just one last on the leadership update. So Bridget Lees, our incoming executive chief nurse, is due to join us on the 1st of January. So then Bridget will join us in the new year. I tend to talk to my report in three areas, sort of national, regional, local. However, many of the items that I would update feature as agenda items on today's board. So whether that's planning updates or our approach to urgent care, improvement through winter or elective recovery, they're all featuring as part of the conversations that we'll have throughout the board. So I don't want to reiterate those, Chair. I will just mention two things very quickly. One is the appointment of our Integrated Care System Chief Executive. Now, Kevin Lavery has been appointed. And that will now trigger a further round of appointments for the executive team and the non-executive members of our ICB. Really excited to see Kevin's appointment. We've circulated Kevin's blog and his CV for colleagues kind of review. You can see the experience that Kevin has in system leadership, local authority leadership here in this country and in other countries, and looking forward to working with Kevin as the system reform agenda develops. And last but not least, the continued focus on our recovery support programme, mobilising our core team, and the focus on our improvement work has been a significant focus over this last 4-week period, Chair, including something that David mentioned in his update earlier, the launch of our cultural engagement platform. Clever Together, a really simple tool to get as many of our 8,000 colleagues talking to us and getting some feedback so we can get into a conversation about our future. And that's under the banner, you might have seen it on Phil's screenshot of moving forward, making changes together. We launched it last week. In the first 24 hours, we had over 500 colleagues contact and hundreds of comments and responses. And that pace has not abated. We are getting some really, really rich, some really good stuff that we need to keep hold of and develop, some really good feedback on areas that aren't working so well for our colleagues that we need to focus on when we talk about our improvement work. Really pleased with the engagement, and we'll bring some of those themes into board in the new year, Chair, when the platform closes. And that's as much as I was going to update on, Chair.
Any questions to the Chief Exec on his report? As he's said, many of the items that he's put in the report is covered in the agenda elsewhere. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for the conciseness. We'll move on then to item 162, the Recovery Support Programme, our improvement plan, and that's our Deputy Chief Exec. So, Chris, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry, put the microphone down. The report this month is a progress update in respect of the formalisation of the core components of the Recovery Support Programme and a briefing on the work being undertaken to further develop and deploy the Trust's existing quality improvement methodology across the improvement work streams. It is something the board have asked about previously. Since the last Trust Board meeting, the improvement priorities and the Recovery Support Programme planning documentation was presented to and approved by the System Improvement Board, and the criteria by which the objectives of the UHMBT Recovery Support Programme will have been demonstrated to have been delivered, that is the exit criteria for the programme, have also now been approved. The exit criteria will now form the basis of our internal and regional assurance processes that the improvements across the identified areas are being achieved and maintained. The board members may have noted we inadvertently left some drafting notes in the report about exit criteria being potentially central to a board-to-board meeting scheduled for December. That meeting is a formal Recovery Support Programme review meeting. It will be held with Trust, system, as in the Integrated Care System, and regional colleagues along with representatives of the national team. It is a standard and formal part of the Recovery Support Programme process. At the heart of the Recovery Support Programme is the quality improvement approach that we will adopt across the component work streams, and colleagues will be aware that the Trust has previously developed an approach to quality improvement which is consistent with the aims and the objectives of the Recovery Support Programme and explicitly sets out to fully involve our colleagues and our teams who are most closely associated with the issues to be addressed. Our next steps will be to systematize the methodology and to ensure that our governance, monitoring and leadership and culture work supports sustainability of the improvements that we deliver. Now, to this end, we're working to understand how best to apply the process and the methodology, the learning and the experience across the improvement agenda covered by the Recovery Support Programme. The Hive, which is the vehicle that describes this, is now needs to move to the next stage of development, and we're working with expert colleagues from NHS England and Improvement to ensure that our arrangements and our approach are as effective as possible. Quality improvement workshops as part of this process are being arranged for mid-December for workstream leads and other nominated individuals central to the progression of the work streams, and presentations have also been prepared for a wider briefing to include clinical and operational forums. The workshops will provide support and focused time to enable the workstream aims, the key drivers and the exit criteria mapping to be completed. And this will also provide us with the core success measures which will inform our assurance and oversight framework and processes that the board's asked about previously. So hopefully that's a bit of an explanation about how we will provide the assurance about the establishment of those core deliverables through our programme. This process, of course, these workshops will also enable us to be clear about capacity and resource risks associated with the delivery of our objectives, and also help inform our future quality improvement development needs and an associated programme for training and coaching support, which will then run alongside this process. The final points really are around the staff engagement sessions. These were completed in October to brief colleagues on the structure, form and purpose of the recovery support programme. And the learning and feedback from this process will help inform our future communication and engagement approach. There is a summary table at section 8 of the paper, which sets out the specific improvement projects by work stream based on the work that we've undertaken in the last month in defining and designing the improvement priorities. The board has previously sought information in respect to the timelines for the development of the assurance framework associated with the recovery support programme. So I've articulated a process that's going to run through December to finalise that work. I can confirm we've now appointed our programme director for the recovery support programme, as well as a business intelligence specialist whose focus over the next period will be the construction of the assurance framework connected to the milestones and trajectories which are being completed for each of the identified work streams. And this will enable the board to triangulate assurance against the expected progression of the core components of the plan. This will take us a little more time than initially expected. Some of the key personnel heavily involved in that have been heavily involved also in other priority items that have been discussed at the board today. But despite this, the first consolidated review of the workstream automated dashboards will be completed by the end of this week, and that will directly inform our next progress update to the board. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Just to contextualise the recovery support programme update that you've given us today and the response, it is something, as you said, that we've asked to come to the board. We know the context, so I'm going to ask the Chief Exec to come in, and then Jackie Bird as well, and then Hugh.
Just a quick update, Chair. So we have rightly spent a good amount of time through the summer constructing a way of working, resourcing the programme appropriately, and agreeing what we're going to achieve through those exit criteria. So we know that as we're deploying this programme, we've got good confidence that it's pointed at the right things in the right way. It's resourced to deliver those objectives we're expecting it to. And we have a process to deliver that sustained change that we've just spent a bit of time on the first item at board today saying has been an issue for us. But I also don't want the board to think that that's all we've been doing in the programme over this past 3 or 4 months. So the board are also cited on the maternity support programme element of the RSP, where we've had the diagnostic delivered. We've also had the safe staffing reviews completed nationally, which are coming to board over the coming period. We've got all of the actions we've delivered through the summer, which are the must-do actions around the CQC reports, in particularly section 31 on stroke. So there is a lot of improvement activity that has already been delivered under the banner of the recovery support programme. And as we progress from this stage and after the review meeting in December, the report will move into delivery, oversight, trajectories and assurance on delivery. So I just wanted to make that point, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Jackie?
So I was absolutely going to make that point that the chief exec has just made, that we are cracking on with this work. I think the other thing that I would just point to is we've done lots of work within our care of the older people's wards around productive ward type methodology and making sure that's right, and we're good to go on that. So that's really positive. But the other area that we worked really well before just after the CQC came back to look at medicine was that we'd done a number of clinical service reviews across every medical ward across the trust. We're just about to start doing that now for surgery. So we've developed the tool further. It's in our audit monitoring and tracking system, which is where we capture all our data, and we're looking to pilot next week and then to go out and start rolling out. And again, we will use that same methodology of bringing external experts in nursing and others to have a look at our ward areas, so we get a good cross section of views on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie. You wanted to come in?
Yeah, I mean, none of us wanted to be part of the recovery support programme, but perhaps one of the plus sides of it is that it will accelerate our approach to improvement, and I'm really encouraged to see the IHI model for improvement and the 6 steps that are part of that becoming centre stage, because I think that gives us a real discipline to the way in which we approach things, and it also gives us a model that can actually be spread across the whole trust. I'm having been involved in this sort of initiative in a previous life. I'm aware that there's quite a lot of training and support that's needed for people to learn the approach and then to take it forward. And it's all about people learning how to do it for themselves and not having it done for them. But clearly, it strikes me that one of the risks might be the capacity of the team to deliver the training and support that's required. And Chris and Aaron have both talked about the resources being there. So I just like assurance that what up until recently has been a pretty small team has got the capacity to actually take this forward, because it is a tremendous opportunity for us to develop a unified approach to improvement across the organisation.
Thanks, Hugh. Chris, you want to come back on that?
Just to give Hugh some assurance that capacity to deliver on these components is a specific component of our planning and our information gathering that we've done, and we've got we do have a view of the further investments that we need to make. We are fortunate to have been able to secure resourcing, of course, for the recovery support programme to help with this, and that isn't just in terms of finances coming into the system. Coming into the organisation to put posts in place like the programme director or the business analyst or some of the clinical leadership time that we're planning to deploy. This is also in terms of expert resource for rollout of training and development piece as well. But we're going to report specifically on how we're going to manage that risk going forward when we've completed this work.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris.
Chris, the recommendations to the board is to approve the progress of the programme. Well, it's to note the progress of the programme.
Yeah.
Yeah, colleagues?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. And the second one I guess this is the approval, to approve the proposed adoption of the UHNBT quality improvement methodology across the RSP work streams, which will then give you the process to support the development of work plans and projects. Yeah, which is related to the high QI. Yeah, Chris, thank you. So we'll move on. Item 163, the Trust CQC Improvement Plan Progress Update. That's our Director of Governance.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to articulate a couple of points about this paper. It is for the board to note the progress that the Trust Management Group is making, which last week signed off on the governance arrangements for the quality assurance of any should do or must do that's being proposed at that forum. There are 87 must do's and should do's for the organisation to go through. And what's really important to us as an organisation is not that we just simply sign off actions as completed. but that we collect the evidence that demonstrates that we've made those changes and that those changes are sustainable and embedded in our practices. So whilst we will take to TMG a clear record of those must-dos and should-dos that need to be signed off, we will also be in the background capturing that data and recording it on the AMAT system. So AMAT stands for Audit Management and Tracking System, to ensure that we've got a very robust and safe place to store that evidence that we have indeed completed those actions. There is, just to bring to your attention, one typo on Appendix 2 where we have inadvertently added an extra should do, so that should read on that first Uhnb care group. The total there is 33, not 34. It's just a typo. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, it's a very concise, very clear report. You?
We received this at Quality Committee and gave it a good look at an understanding of the process, which I think is a real improvement on what we've had before. I mentioned this at Quality Committee and I'll mention it again today, and I think it links back to the urology report we've been discussing earlier. As part of the review that the actions are being appropriately completed and are sustainable, I wonder if we could have formally as part of that a consideration of whether there are issues that have been raised in the work around addressing that action that can then be that are appropriate to be looked at across other parts of the organisation. So you know, Aaron talks about wanting to avoid the term about sharing learning and such like, but is that idea that is there something within this that we should actually therefore be taking elsewhere in the organisation? And I for myself would like to see that almost formally considered each time an action is signed off, that we have actually made that assessment, because I think too often in the past we've dealt with things in silos, and I know we're moving away from that, but it would be quite nice to have that formalised.
I can assure you we would be thinking along those lines, but I'm more than happy to formalise those arrangements and make sure that it's clearly coming through to the Quality Committee, that where we see transferability of a should do or a must do to another part of the organisation, we're absolutely having those conversations and making sure that change is shared, if you like, rather than stored in a silo.
Yeah, and I think it'd be nice to have that actually referenced in the report, that's been considered, and either there was or there wasn't. Because sometimes that's something we might want to just dig into a bit more.
Thanks, you. Thank you. Good point. Any further questions, Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Just a request to Richard if he could bring the 8 items allocated to finance to our meeting in December. That'd be good. Thank you.
Forgive me, Stephen. Yes, that should apply for all the other committees apart from Quality Committee that might have some responsibilities for should do's and must do's. So I'll make sure that they're communicated this week.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. Just building on Hugh's point from the last item, actually, which was around capacity, because when you just note that the percentage of actions that are against, for example, medical care group all coming to Quality Committee, what resourcing is in place really behind those to help ensure that we can really move them forward?
8,000 staff, all highly motivated to make sure that we're not in this position again.
So I understand that, but I think the point just being about the funnel that enables us to funnel out to staff and back into those committees and make sure that we can embed the change. Yeah.
Yes, we definitely committed to that. I think there's the Good Governance Institute work that helps us give us the structure. There's a highly motivated team in governance that are very able to have very clear dialogues with individuals, and there's the AMAT system that helps us support and transfer the evidence and share with people the sort of demonstrable evidence that they need to produce to say we've got it done.
It's just recognising, I think, that a lot of this is the day job. Because we've said that the issues that have been highlighted are that back to basics. It's the good quality ward and department structures. It's the good quality governance, assurance, and risk management. They are predominantly the root causes and the drivers of the issues that we faced. So rather than needing to bring in the troops and put some firepower in, it's largely been a lesson in reprioritising, refocusing through good leadership on what good looks like, back to basics, and pushing those agendas through. there's a little bit of a, for me, as the recovery support programme gets into some of those more thematic areas, we've got additional resource in the recovery support programme in the areas that Chris has outlined, project management, BI, etc. What we want to do though is, as we clear this improvement kind of period under the RSP, what gets left behind has to be part of the sustainability element. So we're already thinking about post RSP, without being presumptuous, what is the infrastructure and the resources and the way of working that we have left behind that allows early warning, rapid improvement, good QI and SI infrastructure and resources to deliver improvements or innovations, even if it's not reactive. So a lot of that will feature at board level as we look for exit and sustainability. So combination of some of the structural elements Richard just mentioned, a bit of this is the day job and back to basics and that reprioritisation of objectives and planning for that likely additional infrastructure resource for sustainability.
Thank you.
So if I summarise, response, Sarah, we have the capacity and capability to fulfil the plan that you've outlined to us, Richard. Yes.
Chair, can I just comment that I think it links back to the previous item about the approach to improvement and the cultural issues that we're doing, because it is about getting to the place where we all, and that's we all, as well as all of our 8,000 staff, understand that we have two jobs. And one is to do the job that we're employed for, and the other one is to actually work out how we can make that better and how we can make a service better associated with that, so how we can do it better. So I think I think going forward, it's part of the cultural shift that we need to see.
Yeah, thank you. Jill, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Hugh half made that point that I was going to make, but I just wanted to add that at Quality Committee, we did identify some pressures in medicine in order to do the huge amount of work that's coming out of CQC. And albeit the day job, I think one of the things that we've learned from urology is it's about teamwork and us all doing it together and helping and thinking about how we can all help make these improvements, because we can't just leave those people in medicine to do it, and we all need to be looking at how we make these improvements.
Thank you. I think we all agree with that, Jill. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to come very quickly to, first of all, the approval recommendations, then I'll do the noting recommendations. So under the approval, to approve the proposed trust management group approval process for the closure of recommendations. Yeah. The closure request to the trust management group for one recommendation. Does that make sense, Richard?
Yes, it does, Chair.
Okay, colleagues, we approve that. The 4 recommendations that have been completed and are undergoing sustainability checks. Again, I'm looking to you, Richard.
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Colleagues approving it, thank you. And the final one, the change in governance reporting for the improvement plan, the trust management group, then assurance committee, then the board of directors. Yeah, great, thank you. And then to note the concentration of CQC recommendations against the medicine care group, which we've just noted, at 52%. The CQC recommendations to the quality committee at 57%, and the concentration of CQ recommendations for HSCA regulations, regulation 12, is 53%. Yeah, we note that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on then to, I'm going to go to item 164, which will take us to, it's a 15-minute item, and then I'm going to have a short break because this is a 3.5-hour meeting, so I'll have a short break at that point, and then I'll reconvene us all together. So if we move on then to patients now, we look to our medical director, Jane, Royal College of Surgeons review of the Uhnb Trauma and Orthopedics Service.
Okay, so I'm presenting a summary of the invited clinical records review into trauma and orthopedics, which was undertaken by the Royal College of Surgeons on behalf of the Trust and on behalf of NHSE and I, which was requested back in March of 2021. And just to note that also here are Dr. Damien Riley, who was the Associate Medical Director involved, and Deborah Turner from NHSE and I, who may be in a position to answer questions better than me. But first, we're going to start just by saying thank you to people who raised concerns, and in particular that was two orthopaedic surgeons. We acknowledge that originally concerns were raised back in 2018, and at the time there was an external review and internal reviews taken into 2019. But again, concerns remained, and they were raised again in December 2020. And the request for this invited clinical record review was a result of the raising of those concerns then. So as a board, we need to apologise to staff and patients that it's taken us 3 years to be in the position to receive this report. And as the incumbent MD, it's my commitment that the recommendations made in the report are transacted, delivered and embedded. But we recognise that many patients have used our trauma and orthopaedic services in this period. And in that context, I need to reassure patients that our plans have already been put in place to contact any of the patients involved in this review to offer support and further clinical input as necessary. So the pack of board papers has got a redacted report, and the reason for that is that there's quite a lot of sensitive and confidential personal information within the full report, which doesn't require to be seen in order to be able to read the report as a member of the public. The full report has been received by the board in a private board meeting. So the background was that the Royal College of Surgeons undertook a review of 46 cases under the terms of reference mentioned, and it's concluded and produced recommendations about patient safety risks. So there's urgent recommendations about 2 particular procedures which will be reviewed. There's a recommendation around more effective MDT work, and there's an urgent recommendation around consent. There's then further improvement recommendations to improve the service around reflection and learning with respect to a specific clinical case, and a recommendation about the continuity of care. And there's a final recommendation regarding the approach that we take to address concerns about a clinician or service going forwards. So now that we've received the report, an action plan is being developed, but we've only been able to do that now that it's possible to share the findings with the relevant clinical teams. But I'm just going to summarise that some actions have already taken place, which include a task and finish group, which has been established, and we've already met a couple of times to ensure that those recommendations are delivered and embedded. We've got a further audit underway in relation to 1 surgeon and 2 specific procedures. There's retrospective structured judgment mortality reviews of cases of people who have died subsequently, which is the normal process now, even if it wasn't at the time. Any patients or the next of kin whose notes were seen by the Royal College of Surgeons as part of this review are being written to and have been written to, and there will be a number for people to call to organise their 30-minute appointment in an independent orthopaedic team members clinic. We will continue to brief and share the report with the GMC and the CQC. That's the summary. Our recommendations were that we propose the oversight of the action plan and via the Trust Quality Committee through to the board by exception, unless people feel that it should be something different. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'll come back to the recommendations after questions, Jane. Chief Executive.
Thanks, Chair. It's to put on record thanks to NHSCI Royal College of Surgeons colleagues who helped conduct the case review, and also to Damien Riley and Deborah, as Jane mentioned, for their important leadership to support us in this. The point I wanted to make is a thematic point, Chair. So we'd spent a good amount of time at the start of the meeting talking about the urology review, which went back over a number of years, and one of its themes was that the Trust has taken action, including independent reviews from external parties, and yet still hadn't landed all of the actions that needed to have landed for these issues to be addressed appropriately. So I don't want to reiterate the actions we discussed under the urology item, but they also have reference here and talks to Hugh's point about that shared change learning that needs to feature in more than one area. So those themes around conducting appropriate investigations, about identifying issues early, about supporting colleagues to raise concerns in the right way so they can be supported for that learning and intervention early. This is going to be thematic for us as we take forward our quality improvement work through the recovery support programme. So I just wanted to make sure that that thematic point isn't missed, Chair, when we talk about the separate actions.
Thank you. Very good point. Thank you very much. Jill, you've got a question?
Yeah, Well, I just wanted to ask whether there was a big issue in this report also about teamwork, and I think that would the board agree that we actually need to look at teamwork in this service and the other services we have to make sure teams are helping each other improve performance and supporting each other, because each of us have weaknesses and we need our team to help us address those weaknesses at an early stage before they impact on patients. So it's a question, how are we going to ensure teams work together effectively to help us address weaknesses that impact on patient care?
I'm going to ask Jane to respond to that. Jane.
So, I mean, I think that there's obviously, we've now identified 2 services. There's a wider thing around that teamwork. I don't know at this point what we've put into the trauma orthopedics service. We haven't got to that point because we've not been able to share this report until now. And I don't know if David Wilkinson has got any, or Damien in fact has got any answers on what the plans were around that. I think there is obviously wider work to do around teamwork in. And we have to apply that across the board. There are some places where, or some teams that naturally it works very well because of the nature of them being able to come together to discuss patients. And there's other way we're going to have to make that a bit more of a conscious decision to work as teams, because it can be very isolating for lots of people. So I can honestly say at this point I don't know what we've got in place or what we're approaching, but I'm sure Damien can answer.
Well, I'm going to ask David to come in first because
okay.
You referred to David probably done some work in that. And then Damien, I'll bring you in after David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jane. Just to say, I made the point earlier, I think, around hotspots through the enhanced support programme. We undertake an organisational development diagnostic, which is highlighted within trauma and orthopedics need to focus on some work on team development, which is in progress at the moment. And just refer also back to the recovery support programme agenda item earlier on, where Chris referenced under culture and leadership. There are 3 programmes of work. One of them is the organisational development activity, and within all of that there needs to be a focus on team development and as well as individual leadership development. Quite the priority we're going to be attaching and the resources that we need to put to that will develop over the coming weeks, but at the moment we are targeting resources around those hotspot areas.
Thank you. Damien?
Here he is.
Aaron, is it okay? Sorry, Mike, is it okay if I take that question for Damien? Damien's had to drop off the call, so if I may, I'm happy to answer on behalf of Damien.
Just introduce yourself, Deborah, while we're in a public board so colleagues know who you are.
Okay, thank you. My name's Deborah Turner. I'm the Clinical Quality Director for NHS Uhnb across the Northwest.
Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, so apologies, Damien's had to drop off, but one thing that Damien would say if he was here is that as we have been waiting for Jane to arrive, it was really important that we didn't wait and started the work. So Damien, as the Associate Medical Director on behalf of Jane, has started the task and finish group. In terms of teamwork, there's a couple of strands to that really. So I think that we are reassured that the trust is prioritising the teamwork around urology and trauma and orthopedics, but within the recommendations of the RCS report, it does talk around continuity of care. So I think the teamwork conversations at this moment in time are around the continuity of care, and I think that that is the right place for the conversations to be starting in those divisions.
Yeah, well, thank you, Deborah. In fact, doubly thank you because you've answered the question I was going to ask about the continuity of care as well. Thank you for that. And Jane, we are aware that you've only just started.
Thank you.
We don't expect you to understand the history and the context. David, thank you there. Any further questions around this report? colleagues.
Can I just ask, so if colleagues could just give us a brief outline of what support's there for patients that may be waiting for an operation at the moment, listed for operation, that may have concerns, because obviously when this is now out in the open and will be picked up by the press and you know, talked about widely. So is what's in place to support those patients who may have some concerns?
So we have immediately concentrated on the patients who we know were involved, and now we can develop that action plan. So my assumption is that we will look to see who has got lists booked procedures which fall into those categories in order to make sure that the decision making and all of those plans were entirely appropriate.
We've also got statements going out, Liz, in terms of taking actions to ensure that any of the risks associated with issues raised have been addressed, and any patients that have been included in the review are going to be written to come and have that 30-minute conversation. So it's very much, don't worry if you haven't been written to. The issues that have been highlighted, we've taken steps to ensure those risks are mitigated, and those that have been written to, they're the only patients that need to be written to as a result of the cases that have been identified. So that'll go out as part of our statement.
We know that there will be action plans that will go through the quality committee. So my question really is, how will we know that the recommendations from this are embedded in the trust? What measurements are we being put in place to ensure that we embed the recommendations? Richard?
Chair, I'm happy to take that. So it's the same principle as the should do's and the must do's, and the same principles as the recommendations from Niche, in that we will be testing each one for the sustainability, and by tracking that we'll be able to find the DNA, if you like, of what it is about this action that we've done, gone back and checked that it remains embedded in practice, and if it doesn't, we need to understand why and what we then need to do about it. No action or should do or must do is going to pass through this organisation without deeply checking that it remains in the system, in our practices, and that all staff are aware of what they need to be doing. And if it's popped out of practice, we'll find out why and made an adjusted action to make sure that it does become part of our culture.
And just for assurance processes, that scrutiny will come through the various subcommittees and then to the board.
It will indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues? No, I can't see any more hands up. Okay. Then if we look at the recommendations, we accept fully the Royal College of Surgeons report. Yes. Yeah. I think quite rightly, we formally apologise for the harm caused to patients and their families. Everybody's unanimous in that. We accept the recommendations. Yeah. And we note that an action plan based on those recommendations will be at the Board of Directors meeting on the 20th of December once it has been scrutinised by the Quality Assurance Committee. Yeah.
Chair, if I could just add for the benefit of the minutes, it's possible that Quality Assurance Committee has been stood down for December, so we just need to adjust and make sure that it pit stops somewhere before it comes to board. So it might not be the Quality Committee that it goes to.
Okay.
Prior to coming to board in December.
Okay. So we will take that recommendation then that one of the subcommittees will scrutinise the action plan prior to it coming to the board.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, it's 15:43, we're just a little bit over the time. I'm going to stop for 5 minutes, give everybody a chance, a comfort break. If we reconvene at 15:50, that gives 7 minutes. It's enough time for the kettle to boil. Yeah, we'll reconvene in 15:50 then. Thank you.
Thank you.